Welcome back, Neela. How have you been? It's been many, many weeks since we recorded our fun adventures in the Christmas market. It was so much fun that you actually left the country and are now in Spain. So, any particular reason why you decided to go with that?
I got so many inspirations by seeing the contributions to our DMN table, and someone said that like in Spain they drink hot chocolate like for the Christmas for the holiday season, and I just wanted to try out how that tastes. So I decided, hey, let's go to Spain. That makes
Yeah,
perfect sense, right?
totally. Yeah, no, there are cheaper alternatives, but they aren't as warm. So I think you made a good call there. But I do know I think one or two places here in Berlin that might have hot chocolate, but I can't guarantee it. So maybe it's a good idea. Now, obviously, I want you to return in order to we can both look at what's been happening since we created the DMN table
Sure.
and
Let's
threw
look
it
at
out
the
there.
Yeah, let's look at the table. Let's look what the people have like contributed. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and afterwards, I'm going to show you the model that I produced because I actually took that DMN table that we had and I ended up using BPMN to like enhance the readability a little more and enhance the usability a little more. And I'll even let you get to play with it. You get to actually
Cool.
step through it and find what kind of drink you like.
And also it tells me maybe which country I have to visit next. Like, if I go for I always go to the country where the drink is from.
Yeah, somehow I don't think you'll be going to Scotland or something. I feel you'll somehow end up in like, South America or Mexico or something. That's sort of more your style anyway.
Okay. I
So I'll pull it
think
over to
that's
you.
fine.
I'll put it over to you now and you go forth and check out the DMN table and see what kind of contributions we've gotten.
Cool. This is our diamond table after the contributions, and thank you so much for all the contributions that we got. We received comments on LinkedIn and on Slack, and also we got pull requests on the GitHub repo, and that's really great because that really makes sure that the holiday season is not getting boring and we always have the next drink in our hand and we know what to drink, and also we have the chance to try out recommendations by other people from the community. And I think I saw already some stuff that I didn't know exists. So this is quite cool. And I made a slightly change to the table. I put the links that was in the annotation as an extra output here. And you will see later why we need this output parameter. But let's talk about feelings. Let's talk about holiday feelings because, this DMN table uses feel. And feel is the friendly enough expression language. And it is part of the DMN specification by the OMG. And we use it in two ways. So we can use it as unary test expressions, and that basically serves as input variables here for this table. And also you can use feel as general expressions, and you will see later some of those. And let's understand how we use feel here in a very basic way. So we use it here as input expressions, and this will always return a true or false. And we hit a rule whenever we have a row with input variables where we have a true for each cell. And that means basically, let's take maybe something where we just have one value. That means we need to have here none. We need to have a warm drink, and we need to have the region Europe, and then we have a true for this row, and then we would get an output Kinderpunsch and Nico as a recommendation or at the person who recommended it. If we have two values in one cell, we have an OR logic. So that means we need to have an input that is sum or lots to evaluate this cell to true. In this case, we could have sum or lots, and sometimes we have nothing in this, and that means basically it doesn't matter what we have here, so it could be either. And you could also apply, for example, I could change that here. If I want to say match one, I also could have match none. And then it's not Europe, but I could also basically change that here and select everything else instead of Europe. And that would be basically the same. So I can also apply this one here as a not logic. Yeah, and feel was also built as a language that can be understood by business. So business has an easy way to understand how those rules are built up. Let's see where we use this table because we've built a fun process around it. And you see already this decision is called by one process. Let's have a look.
So we can see here that the process model, if I turn on token simulation, is expected to work like this. We start our instance, we add the criteria required for the kind of drink we're interested in having, as the DMN table requires. The DMN table will then give us some results. Now, the thing about a collect DMN table is that we could have potentially quite a few results. The happy path is that exactly one drink suits us perfectly, in which case we will go straight through the process and then we'll get email details of that drink. Fantastic. Now, things get more complicated if, for instance, we return, let's say, more than one drink that's suitable for us to have, in which case we'll need to choose the one we actually want details on. So in that case, we get our set of drinks. We then have to go down here where we can select from a dynamically generated table in some front end. And then we'll be able to select the one we want. And then once we get that one, we'll get the detail of that drink emailed to us. So that seems all pretty fun. But how did I actually make this executable? Let's look into the details right now. We shall start at the beginning because that's where things usually do start. And at the beginning here is a user task that has add drink criteria as the requirement. Now, we actually know what should be in there because we saw the DMN table earlier, and we need basically to know how much alcohol someone wants, if they want a warm drink or a cold drink, what region they're currently in. But we also need some additional information other than the DMN table stuff, because we also need their email address so that we can add it here, and their name so we can politely ask them what's going on. Now, because I didn't want to have to build my own front end, I went here and I have here enter drink criteria as a form. So if I open that up, it looks like this. You can see here that I have, let's find out what drink you'd like. They have to enter their name, which they have to give us a Boolean, whether they want a warm drink or not. They have a drop down here where they can have a selection of alcohol. And then they also have the region and their email address, of course. And of course, all of these create variables. So for instance, the region you can see here is a drop down list because we have a very specific set of regions that the DMN table can accept. So we can ensure that by having a drop down that won't be a problem for the user. And then once that's selected, we can see here that we have a key or variable called region that will then be passed on to the next task. And the same goes for warm, alcohol, and email address and name. All create different variables that are then passed on to the process. So the way we attach this is we simply build a process here. We build a form here, and once it's in the same folder as the DMN table that we want, we would go into the DMN table and select it right here and click here, and you can see that we have the form already selected. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Now the fun part, which is, of course, connecting this task to the DMN table. Now, same as before, the DMN table it needs to exist somewhere deployed to the same cluster, which I've already done. And once it's actually deployed, we can then ensure we call it correctly by going to implementation, selecting DMN decision, and then call decision needs to be to equal the ID of the decision table. For those who don't know, you can find that by going to the DRD, and then you can have this ID here, choose decision drink. Okay, so that's the key that we're using that we're then going to put right here. Now, next up, we are going to get a collection back. Okay, so we're going to get a JSON array of results, and we want to put that into a variable that we can then manipulate later on. In this case, the results of our DMN table are going to be put into a variable called drink selected, which will be 0 or more drinks that match the criteria. And then we actually need to use this variable in order to route the process further. Okay, so for instance, there are 3 possibilities I discussed. The first, the happy path, is that there's exactly one drink that matches. So here I've used feel because it is Christmas and Christmas feelings and so on. I've used feel to say count the elements in drinks selected. If it's exactly 1, we go this way. And we use the same criteria here. If the count is greater than 1, we go here. And if it's anything else, which is probably a null or a 0, then we go up here where we don't match and everything is gone forever. Okay, so there we've created our variables in here to put into the DMN table. We then use the output of the DMN table to route the process. But we're not done yet, because one of the harder things is to try and offer the user a dynamic list of the drinks that were selected and then pick one to then get more information about. And that actually did involve a good bit of use of feel. So I want to go through that in more detail. So how do I want this to appear to the user? Well, luckily enough, we have a front end that I demonstrated already, but for this, I want to use radio buttons, which you can see from the docs are a compatible part of the form builder. And so therefore we see a list of all the drinks, they select one, and we continue with that list. The radio buttons themselves also allow for dynamic options. You see option source right here. And if we open up this little page, we will get this, which explains how we can take a list of key value pairs and then turn them into radio buttons. So we can see here that the format we actually need is this, where we're going to have a variable, and each within that is an array of labels and values for each one. Now, interestingly, we need to create this on the fly, because the output from the DMN table, it actually looks like this. So it has drink selected, it then has an array, but then it has an object that is a drink name, we have a recommender, and we have a URL. So we need to find a way to turn this into this. And this is a really good opportunity to show the power of DMN. Now, with a little help from some folks on the field team at Camunda, they were able to give me a really nice way to do this. And let me show you. I'll paste the code in here. Okay, so here's what we're doing. We're actually selecting all the drink names, first of all, okay, into a variable called drink names. We then are going to create a result variable, and that result variable is going to take the values of for each element in drink names and then create a value and label with that drink. What does that do? In the long run, it basically creates an output variable that is exactly what we need, a value and label. And then this can turn this object into here, and then subsequently we can then generate the radio buttons. And where do we put this little DMN expression? If we go back to the modeler, we can see that here I have an input section, and in here I've just added that exact same thing. I've also added one additional thing, which is distinct values, which means that if there's duplicates of the same drink, which is possible, we don't want to show those, so we'll just get single values. And that is how then we can create a local variable called drink list. And if we go back to our form that I created, we see here that this just needs to take in, it can create drink choice, and we can see it's going to use input data, and the input data is drink list, what's generated from the field expression.
Cool, now that we understand how this process is built and what we do here in this process, let's use it and let's start a process instance and let's get a drink recommendation for for now and for today. So I start an instance, and now it links me directly to Operate, so I can here see the runtime of my process instances, and it is still loading, but I see here now I arrived at the user task, and now we can also see how the form looks like and task list. So I can go to task list. I see this task is here at drink criteria. I claim that task for myself, and actually I would like to have something warm, and I don't feel like alcohol at the moment, and I'm in Europe, and let's give my email address. So I can also get the recommendation. I complete the task, and I can go to Operate again. There it was, like I refreshed it, but now I see here it ran through our decision table. I see here the drinks selected already. I see that there were multiple. Remember, we talked about the collected policies, so probably we had more rows that evaluated to true. And now I'm here at the user task to select a drink. So let's have a look what we got. So I claim it here, and here I have a nicer view. Of course, I could also see the process variable and Operate, but here what I see is, I have different options, and maybe I go with the old Jamaica ginger beer. This sounds quite interesting, and I complete the task, and now what is next in the process? Basically, the idea is that we use the, oops, there it is, we use the send grid connector to send an email, and yeah, I just received it, and here it is. It was recommended by Tees. Thanks, Tees, for the recommendation, and I can have a look here at that link, what basically this means or what the drink is about. And here I have the old Jamaica ginger beer. Cool. And the nice thing is now I can use this over the time of the holidays, and in the end we can use Optimize to find out which drink is the most famous holiday drink, and I'm really curious to find out what it will be. I'm here in Optimize, and I can create here a new report, and let's see. Oh, Niall has a lot of processes going on here. That's not so helpful. Let's look for something with drink. And yeah, that looks like our process model. Actually, let's create a blank report, and yeah, let's see what we can do. I have here the data source selected. Maybe I would like to change the version to the always latest one. Let's see if that works. And here, and I want the process instance. So 7 process instances have gone through the process already, and let's apply a filter. Let's look for the drink, and that's basically the drink choice. And now maybe we would like to have a pie chart, and here with the pie chart what we see nicely is now an overview of things that has been selected. I don't know why we have null undefined. That's maybe something we have to discover, maybe from a previous variable that does not exist anymore. But yeah, so far so good. I think every drink has been selected once. I think we should run this process multiple times over the season to see which one will become the most favorite seasonal drink. And I can already save that.
Nela, welcome back. You were deep in the fun Beefman world of the thing I created. How did that go?
Was quite fun. Yeah, it was nice. And I also used Optimize to find out which drink is the most favorite ones for the holiday season. That was quite good.
Used, best based on your own preferences. So I guess, do we have a definitive answer about your favorite holiday drink?
Not yet. We have to run this on your cluster over the holiday season and talk in January again to see which one is winning. So far they are all equal, seems. Yeah.
I think we should create a process for rating the drinks as well. So what if we can have some kind of rating system that people get to try the drink and then throw it back into a rater? Then we can actually compare and optimize how often the drinks were selected and what ratings they were gotten, and then rechange the DMN table.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I like it.
Let's see if well, of course, as we both are aware, the best way to get a process like that created is by asking the community, because of course everything that we saw today has been put into the GitHub repo that is linked below, and we're still more than happy to take more contributions both to the BPMN and DMN tables.
And yeah, also if you end up with no drink, then it's definitely missing in the DMN table. So if you want for the pass that just is sadly going through one end event without sending an email, you should consider make a contribution to the table. So we include that drink or drink for your selection in our table.
But that brings our seasonal fun to an end for this year, Nela. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other contributions we get over the Christmas. Same. And happy to everyone who contributed. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Thanks to everybody watching. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome back. Sorry, I was just start, right?
Should I start? Yeah, I start.
I think I start because you just come back from talking.
Okay.
Yeah.